Manju Moeddin, Dr. Mumtaz, my great friend from your reason for inviting me here to present adolescent PCO current concept. I'm really happy to speak on this topic in this forum, especially when the Foxy is going to be celebrating Adolescent Week from tomorrow. We have a good e-conclave on adolescent health education. So I request all of you to participate in good number in the Foxy program. So let's move on to my topic. And I really need to acknowledge my previous speakers, who Dr. Vidya Pancholia, Dr. Yadav, and Dr. Deepa for really trying and keeping women sexually young and healthy. So, and good to share the podium with them. Adolescent PCO current concept. We know about PCO since last 85 years, but it is still a challenging problem in terms of diagnosis and management. We are flooded with information on PCOS, and I am not going to confuse you because there are lots of confusion in PCO. Let's move on to from confusion to conclusion. What I have done in my talk, I have divided it into two halves. One is I'm going to touch upon the confusing areas and current concept in adolescent PCOS. So we are going to be looking at nomenclature, symptoms, diagnostic criteria, and management options. We all know polycystic ovarian syndrome is a generic description for a broad spectrum of clinical and morphological findings in women with an endocrine dysfunction, specifically abnormal androgen production and metabolism. It affects 5% to 10% of female population, and it is the most common endocrinopathy in a women of reproductive age. What is about adolescent? Polycystic ovary again is a most common endocrine condition affecting 6 to 18% of adolescent girls. It depends on the diagnostic criteria used and the population studied. And if you know, the adolescent is defined by the World Health Organization as a period between 10 to 19 years of age that includes significant and critical changes in growth, development, and puberty. So when you are making your diagnosis, you have to take this into account and have to have a different age groups like 10 to 13 and 16 to 19 and all that. So let's look at first the confusing areas of PCO. What is there in name PCOS? I think PCOS is a misnomer as ovaries do not contain epithelial cysts, but they are actually antral follicles. And moreover, the name PCOS neither reflects the hyperandrogenism, which is essential for diagnosis, nor it represents the metabolic derangements. So this is a typical picture of PCOS in adult women when you do a sonography, and especially this is done by transvaginal sonography, multiple follicles peripherally arranged or necklace pattern is seen. If you look at the symptoms of PCOS in an adolescent girl, they anyways will have changes of puberty similar to PCOS like menstrual irregularities, acne, and hyperandrogenism. So again, it is confusing. And when it comes to diagnosis of PCO, I really find in my clinic to convince patient that you do not have PCOS. Because the diagnosis of PCOS, there are many stakeholders in diagnosis, patient herself, her parents, dermatologist because she is visiting to them for acne problem, sonologist, dietitian, endocrinologist, and last come the gynecologist. So I think we really need to look into how really to tell that what is the correct way of diagnosis. And then we have our biggest competitor Google, where they come read and they come to you that I have a PCOS problem. What they are doing, they are using the same guidelines for diagnosis of PCOS which are being used for the adult. We are all familiar with these guidelines for diagnosis. National Institute of Health criteria, any two criteria, which is hyperandrogenism, menstrual irregularities. Androgen excess PCOS society criteria is hyperandrogenism, menstrual irregularity or PCO on ultrasonography, and Rotterdam criteria is hyperandrogenism, menstrual irregularity, and polycystic ovaries on ultrasonography. Again, the same picture of PCO. When I was doing the literature search for adolescent PCO concepts, this is a very good and interesting paper and very, very inclusive of all studies. this paper I came across, and adolescent polycystic ovary syndrome, according to the international evidence-based guideline, and couple of my slides are from that. Current concepts of in adolescent PCO are the international evidence-based PCOS guidelines aim to promote accurate and timely diagnosis to optimize consistent care and to improve health outcomes for adolescent and women with PCO. Key changes within the guidelines recommendation include the elimination of specific unnecessary tests and importance of identifying adolescent at risk of PCOS. And the changes also aim to avoid misdiagnosis or delayed under or overdiagnosis, and adolescents consensus recommendations for PCO diagnosis are based on the best quality available evidence and its limitation. So when you're taking up diagnosis of PCO in adolescents, specifically challenges include underdiagnosis, overdiagnosis, and the use of inconsistent non-evidence-based approaches in the diagnosis and management of PCOS among specialists, general practitioners, and allied health professionals. Only adolescent studies are limited, and if they are there, they are of suboptimal in quality. So that is the difficulty. So how do you diagnose? Hyperandrogenism, defined as hirsutism, severe acne or biochemical hyperandrogenemia, confirmed using validated high quality assays, and for that calculated free testosterone, free androgen index, or bioavailable testosterone should be used to assess biochemical hyperandrogenism in the diagnosis of PCOS. Pelvic ultrasound is not recommended for diagnosis of PCOS within 8 years post-menarche, and anti-Mullerian hormone levels not recommended for PCOS diagnosis. Exclusion of other disorders that mimic PCOS has to be taken into account, and for adolescents who have features of PCO but do not meet diagnostic criteria, an at-risk label can be considered with appropriate symptomatic treatment and regular re-evaluation. This is a table depicting adolescent polycystic ovary syndrome according to international evidence-based guideline. That when do you define irregular menstrual cycles? Because two important diagnostic criteria are irregular menstrual cycles and hyperandrogenism. If a young girl menstrual cycles are normal pubertal transition, it should not be labeled as PCO. If she's less than cycle ranging from 21, less than 21, and more than 45 should be considered as abnormal. More than 3 year post-menarche, less than 21 or more than 35 days, or if she's getting 8 cycles per year, should be considered as irregular menstrual cycle, and more than 1 year post-menarche, more than 90 days for any one cycle. Primary amenorrhea by age of 15 years or more than 3 years post-thelarche, that is after breast development, has to be labeled as irregular menstrual cycle. If you look at the treatment part, we all know, I'm not going to go into detail of treatment part. Oral contraceptive pills, metformin, cyprotenone acetate, and lifestyle modification is much talked about in treatment of PCO. The problem is there is women are continuously consuming medicine without revision. They have been started on metformin or cyprotenone acetate when they had irregular menses, but without any further consultations, they kept on taking. So you really need to schedule follow-up appointment for these girls, and menstrual cycle re-evaluation can occur over 3 years post-menarche, and where only menstrual irregularities or hypoandrogenism are present initially, evaluation with ultrasound can be done after 8 years post-menarche, and screening for anxiety and depression is required, and assessment of eating disorders warrant consideration, and available data endorse the benefit of healthy lifestyle intervention to prevent excess weight gain and should be recommended for symptoms management, and the combined oral contraceptive pills or metformin may be beneficial. So let's look at what is new. We need to change our practices. Let's review. There's a very good article in our Joggi by Dr. Suvarna Khadilkar, where she's talking about to prevent diagnostic and therapeutic pitfalls, a new nomenclature, HA-POTS, hyperandrogenism and persistent ovarian dysfunction syndrome, is proposed, which reflects good clinico-pathological correlation. We know about primary PCO. We know all possible symptoms it can produce. We understand metabolic consequences, but what we have not understood is cause, and hence we have no success in finding the cure. So, etiological classification of PCOS is being proposed. So, primary PCO is most common variety of PCOS without any known cause, and proposed theory suggests that there is functional ovarian hyperandrogenism along with disturbance of hypothalamo-pituitary ovarian axis function. So the pathology is long-standing ovulatory dysfunction and long-standing hyperandrogenism perpetuate each other irrespective of the cause. And this vicious cycle of one precipitating the other eventually produce PCOS phenotype irrespective of initiating mechanism. So different phenotypes we again know according to 2012 NIH guidelines, that is type A, B, C, and D. That A is hyperandrogenism, ovulatory dysfunction, and polycystic ovarian morphology. Phenotype B is hyperandrogenism and ovarian dysfunction, hyperandrogenism and polycystic ovary morphology, and ovulatory dysfunction and polycystic ovary morphology. We really need to look at the PCO mimics. We cannot label every young adult or young adolescent women coming to our clinic with menstrual irregularity as PCO. We need to look into these things as well: obesity, hypothyroidism, and prolactinoma. So these are different things which are proposed. Like there is HA pod secondary. There are different causes. The hyperprolactinemia. There can be thyroid disorder. There can be congenital adrenal hyperplasia, syndrome of severe insulin resistant androgen secreting tumor, Cushing syndrome, and drug induced, that is anti-epileptic drugs. So clinical categories as per core features and comorbidities. To prevent diagnostic pitfalls and to plan the management, all patients should get a diagnostic code at the end of complete investigation, and depending on which abnormalities are detected, and then they are diagnostic code is being allotted. We talk too much about obesity, and PCO go hand in hand. One study reported 36.9% complete recovery from all features of PCOS with weight reduction, and only 15.4% have persistent PCO feature. So obesity is cause or effect or incidental or comorbidity is not clear. Complete remission has been documented with significant weight loss. These girls need to advise on diet, exercise, and maybe if they are morbidly obese, then bariatric surgery may be advised or maybe at least talked about. Thyroid disorder and PCOS, hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's thyroiditis are commonly found associated in women with PCOS. So the most logical explanation is that thyroid disorder, particularly hypothyroidism, often leads to persistent anovulation or ovulatory dysfunction. Longer the duration of dysfunction, more sustained is the impact of ovulation. And high estrogen levels during intrauterine life interferes with thymus development, hence could cause both hypothyroidism and PCOS. And young women with PCOS have imbalance between various sex steroids. So the resultant lack of progesterone triggers the vicious cycle of PCOS, thereby leading to hyperandrogenism. But this does not happen in all women with thyroid disorder. It happens more commonly in genetically susceptible individuals. Common genetic predisposition exists for development of both the diseases. Hyperprolactinemia and PCOS. We have to be vigilant for hyperprolactinemia because direct action of prolactin on adrenal cortex is hypothesized. Hyperprolactinemia leads to chronic persistent ovulatory dysfunction with sustained lack of progesterone, which may trigger the vicious cycle of PCOS and hyperandrogenism. Hyperprolactinemia cases, elevated prolactin levels are found in 6% of women with hirsutism. Very effective treatment of this condition with cabergoline and dopamine and agonist is possible. Adrenal hyperandrogenic disorder or congenital adrenal hyperplasia is well-defined secondary cause of PCOS, is non-curable as it is a congenital disorder, but this can certainly be effectively controlled and symptoms may be relieved. Cushing syndrome. One survey reported that only 6% of gynecologists screened PCO referrals for Cushing syndrome. We must remember that if diagnosed early, Cushing syndrome will be completely cured, unlike PCOS. So suspecting diagnosis is very important. Suspicion should arise when clinical features like plethoric round faces, supraclavicular fat pads, and abdominal purple striae are found in addition to classic features of PCOS. So we have to remember that. And syndrome of severe insulin resistance, SSIR. It is a group of disorder based on severe insulin resistance, irrespective of whether patient is obese or non-obese. It is not very uncommon, and the prevalence of 1.5% of all PCO phenotypes have been reported to have SSIR. Diet control as well as insulin sensitizer like lindions, especially pioglitazone, can be more helpful than metformin. Acanthosis nigricans eruptive xanthomas as a result of severe hyperglycemia and PCO. So suspected cases are to be referred to endocrinologist, and suspicion must arise when a fasting insulin level is more than 20.9 microgram per ml and a peak insulin value after glucose load is about 209 microgram per ml in a non-diabetic girl with BMI less than 30 kilogram. Likewise, suspicion must arise when insulin requirement is more than 3 unit per kg per day in diabetic girl with BMI less than 30. Androgen secreting tumors. Classic PCOS is generally insidious in onset and presents with milder hirsutism without much virilizing effects. And usually, the serum testosterone levels are more than 200 nanogram per ml. This condition will be certainly a differential diagnosis of PCOS. Sertoli Leydig cell tumors are known to cause this picture, and however, any other ovarian tumor may also present with signs of hyperandrogenism. So androgen secreting tumors is completely curable and surgical, and treatment resolves all the symptoms. Only thing we have to think about all this when we are dealing with young PCOs or any women with PCO. Drug induced PCO. Epilepsy in young girl is more susceptible to lead to PCO when treated with valproic acid. This anti-epileptic drug activates the transcription of P450C17 and other enzymes involved in steroidogenesis, and one meta-analysis suggested that in women treated with valproic acid for epilepsy, the incidence of PCOS is 1.9-fold higher than in women treated with other drugs. So, take-home message is hyperandrogenism and chronic anovulation are the most common endocrine disorders of women, and most patients have polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is essentially benign but might be associated with increased cardiovascular morbidity. PCO is associated with specific endocrine and ultrasonographic features. Some patients exhibit similar feature to PCOS, might have other underlying diagnoses such as adrenal and ovarian steroidogenesis deficiencies, adrenal and ovarian androgen secreting tumors, other medical or endocrine disorders, and are to be on medications thought to cause PCOS, such as anti-epileptics. Unlike PCOS, some of these conditions can occasionally be life-threatening and require prompt diagnosis and treatment. So we all have to be aware of this, and we all have to be alert and to look in our clinics for this other conditions as well. So if we conclude, there are some well-defined factors which lead to PCOS phenotype. A concept of secondary PCOS is being described recently, and this condition, even though rare, is completely curable as majority of these factors are treatable. Hence, it is advisable to actively look for this condition and offer treatment in time, and not to label only PCOS unless we have concrete diagnostic criteria positive in the case. So just in summary, it is very disappointing that we have still not been able to know the exact cause, and hence we cannot completely cure this syndrome. With availability of effective drugs and lifestyle modification, it can only be controlled and symptoms can be reduced. And we should have dedicated adolescent clinics to let young girls know that we care for them, identify at-risk PCO girls, follow them up regularly, bring them back to the clinics, and provide them a space to talk about their problems and sensitize them about metabolic disorders they can have in the future, but for God's sake, don't push them for early marriages and early childbirth because they have PCO, which very commonly happens in practices when a woman comes with PCOS, because everybody is worried about infertility associated with PCOS. So thank you very much